AIDS brings a response
Fight
from the
against
government.
AIDS, the disease which claims life.
Welcome to AIDS: The Lost Voices with me, William Hampson. In this series, we journey through the decades to explore how Britain reported on the AIDS pandemic. We'll delve into the newspaper archives from the 80s, 90s and noughties, unearthing individual stories that reveal the human experiences behind the headlines. Join me as we seek to understand the complexities of a crisis that reshaped lives and challenged societal perceptions. Ready? Let's go.
Delightful and only slightly zany, and of course, all in the best possible taste, Kenny Everett!
My guests tonight include Mr. Buddy Rich and his band, Roy Castle, and that amiable lunatic, Kenny Everett.
And now, Kenny Everett, the man the BBC tried to gag.
The House of the Haunted Choppers. And don't worry, the decapitation scene is done in the best possible taste.
Hello, my little video buffs. It is me, the enchanting Marcel. The experience of a lifetime on legs.
Yes, it's the Kenny Everett Show.
Dear God in heaven, please let this show go okay, with no major boobs or goofs, and without accidentally saying a rude word like knickers or bum. By the way, are you listening?
In this final episode of Pride Month Icons, we take a look at Kenny Everett, a figure many of you have repeatedly requested. While some in the media over the decades have claimed that Kenny didn't do much for HIV/AIDS awareness, despite living with a virus that ultimately ended his life prematurely, I beg to differ. It is true he wasn't vocally campaigning or loudly advocating, and the tabloid press seemingly forced him to confirm and go public with his HIV/AIDS status, invading what little privacy he had. However, Kenny never shied away from the topic when confronted. Instead, he spoke openly and sometimes even used humour to cope with and address the virus. Through this, Kenny Everett displayed a remarkable sense of hope and optimism for those living with HIV/AIDS and those in the high-risk groups, even as he likely wrestled privately with the fear of how the disease might claim his life, especially after he'd experienced firsthand the decline of his lover, Nikolai, and many of his friends. One of the first mentions of Kenny Everett and AIDS was on the 6th of October 1985 in the tabloid newspaper The Sunday Mirror, who ran the front page headline, "Exclusive, TV Stars Gay Life, Kenny Everett Amazing AIDS Pact," where they report. Comedian Kenny Everett yesterday revealed his amazing AIDS pact with the two men who share his life. Kenny, whose homosexuality is an open secret to showbiz friends, fears he could become a victim of the killer gay plague. In an emotional interview, he confessed, quote, "I am devastated by the death of Rock Hudson. I felt ill when I saw pictures of what the disease had done to him. 2 years ago, when this whole AIDS scare began, I came to an agreement with my constant companions, Nikolai and Pepe. We decided that if any one of us got AIDS, then we must assume that all three of us would have it. If that happens, and God forbid that it ever does, we would look after and care for each other. We have talked about it and know exactly what to do. It would mean abandoning everything, selling our homes and everything we own, leaving our jobs and taking off around the world until we drop dead. We wouldn't give in to AIDS, but go out in style, in one last wild fling," end quote. The madcap TV and radio star opened his heart about the life he shares with Russian-born Nikolai Grushonovich and Spanish waiter Pepe Flores. The threesome lived together at 40-year-old Kenny's flat in London's South Kensington and are regularly seen at showbiz parties. Earlier this year, Kenny and 33-year-old Nikki, a computer analyst, were guests at the 21st birthday bash of Princess Diana's brother, Viscount Charlie Althorpe. Kenny also told of rumours circulating in the entertainment world. He disclosed that his agent, Joe Gurnett, had recently been approached by several sources asking just one question. Quote, "They all wanted to know, is it true that Kenny's got AIDS? All I've got to say is, no, I don't have AIDS, at least as far as I'm aware. If people thought I did, I would be heartbroken. I don't want people to stop kissing me, hugging me, inviting me to parties, and I'd never be able to sell my flat," end quote. Kenny, Premier Margaret Thatcher's favourite comedian, said he had never spoken publicly about his homosexuality before, but he told the Sunday Mirror, quote, "In the past, I have hinted in interviews that I am bisexual. I'm gay, but it's boring to make a big deal about it. It's not going to come as a huge surprise to people who have seen me dress up in women's clothing on TV. It's pretty widely known in show business, but it's not something I want to stand up and shout about. I would rather talk about my work than my private life." End quote. Kenny is probably best known for his outrageous TV show featuring scantily clad lovelies like buxom Cleo Rocos. This weekend, Nicky and Pepe, 24, were taking a sunshine break in Spain. Kenny is expected to join them in a week's time.
He got this new boyfriend called Nikolai. And Nikolai happened to have a boyfriend anyway called Pepe, a Spanish one. So there was 3 of them in that relationship.
Kenny adored Nikolai. He found him exasperating sometimes, but there was a very strong bond there. He was terribly fond of him, in love with him, no question. I remember once saying something slightly derogatory about Nikolai, and Kenny shot me an absolute, dagger's look. Do not mess with my man.
Nikolai had a deadly charm. Yes. Nikolai was a very charming man. Charmed birds off trees and anything off anybody or anything, yeah.
There was 4 of them, the Fab Four, as they were called on numerous occasions. Nikolai, Pepe, Freddie Mercury, and Kenny.
Freddie Mercury did have a relationship with Nikolai, Kenny Everett's friend and lover, and so they were linked in that rather curious way. The 2 of them were friends, but they did share a partner in common.
And then Pepe, one of the members of this ménage à trois, became the centre of the story when, on the 31st of October 1985, the Mirror newspaper ran the headline, "My Husband and I," with the strapline, "TV Kenny fights to keep his gay pals' act together," where they report. Gay comedian Kenny Everett skipped off to lunch with his 2 boyfriends yesterday, vowing to carry on fighting to keep the trio together. Before dashing off on his date with Spanish waiter Pepe and Russian-born Nikolai, TV star Kenny said, quote, "There's nothing worse than only having one husband," end quote. Kenny's cosy setup has been threatened by an immigration order to boot Pepe Flores out of Britain. Pepe has been given a reprieve while the case is argued out. Kenny thought he was seeing solicitors about it yesterday. Meanwhile, 33-year-old Nikolai Grishonovich told of the domestic bliss they share at Kenny's home in South Kensington, London. Quote, "Life is fun for the 3 of us because we all love each other," he said. "We all get on extremely well and there is plenty of room in the flat. No, I don't get jealous. I love Kenny, but I don't want him exclusively for myself. I like my freedom." End quote. The trio go to shows, museums and eat out together. At home, Pepe does the housework while Kenny and Nikolai put their feet up. Quote, "Pepe likes to do it," laughed Nikolai. "He is very efficient." The trouble is, Pepe went to Spain for a short visit. On his return, he was refused entry at Gatwick Airport. He was allowed in after Kenny dashed to the airport to plead with immigration officials. They have a week to persuade the authorities that Pepe should be allowed to stay. And for as much as we love the tabloid press, they do, retrospectively, provide us with valuable insight, because when they follow a story, they pursue it consistently. But I think we'd probably all agree not accurately all the time. This persistence, this intrusiveness, allows us to receive updates that might otherwise be lost to time. An example is found in the Mirror's coverage of Pepe's immigration battle, where, 5 days after the initial coverage, on the 5th of November 1985, they ran the headline, "Kenny's Last Supper with Pepe," where they report. Comedian Kenny Everett shared a farewell supper last night with his gay lover, Pepe Flores, who flies home to Spain today. Waiter Pepe has been ordered out of Britain in an immigration wrangle. Kenny and waiter Pepe, who have been sharing a Kensington flat with a 3rd man, went with 4 friends to a Chinese restaurant near their home. As the party laughed and clinked glasses, Kenny said, quote, "It has been a terrible week," end quote. The bill for the meal came to more than £200. Kenny and Pepe left the restaurant separately, looking subdued. The restaurant owner said later, quote, "Kenny treated all 5 guests as he always does. He is very generous. It was a very special night for him," end quote. Kenny's guests drank wine. He preferred sake, a drink made from rice. Then, in the Mirror newspaper the following day, the headline, Sleepy Pepe. Comedian Kenny Everett's expelled gay lover, Pepe Flores, overslept and missed his plane home to Spain yesterday. He is due to go today. And again, the following day on the 7th of November 1985, Pepe flies out. Comedian Kenny Everett's gay lover, Pepe Flores, flew home to Spain yesterday after being kicked out of Britain in an immigration wrangle. Then, by the 8th of December 1985, another tabloid, the Sunday People, ran the headline, Kenny walks out on Pepe, where, they report. All those who said it wouldn't last were right. Kenny Everett has dumped his Spanish boyfriend and is anxious to return to London's limelight. Only last month, Outrageous Ken said he was quitting Britain to live on the Costa del Sol with Pepe Flores, the much-moustached waiter who won his heart. He even put the luxury Kensington home he shared with Pepe and his other lover, Russian-born Nikolai, up for sale. But no sooner had Ken set up a love nest for the threesome near Marbella than he was longing for London again. At a showbiz party the other night, Kenny told friends he found the scene in Spain altogether too slow. Quote, he was clearly becoming rather bored, said a friend. Now, Kenny's back in town and working, would you believe, for the former arch-enemies at BBC Radio 1, the station that sacked him. He has teamed up with that other notorious Radio 1 rebel, Tony Blackburn, to work on a new series to be broadcast in the new year called Radio. So, it sounds as if poor old Pepe and Nikolai will just have to get along without him. Then, in March 1986, the body of James George Burns was discovered in the basement of an Earl's Court flat. James, along with 3 other young gay men, had been brutally murdered by Michele Lupo, who later died of AIDS while serving a life sentence. This tragic case led us to produce 2 podcast episodes, one dedicated to the memory of these young men, and the second focused on Michele Lupo himself. During the investigation, Kenny was approached by the police to assist with a public appeal, primarily targeting the gay community. This appeal was notably reported by the Wolverhampton Express on the 22nd of March 1986, highlighting the urgent need for community cooperation in the search for justice, where, they report, Kenny Everett has offered to help detectives desperate for clues to a brutal homosexual murder by a killer with a lust for blood. The TV and radio personality offered to make an appeal for witnesses who may have seen 37-year-old train guard Mr. James Burns before he was battered, strangled and dumped in a derelict basement near the Earl's Court Exhibition Centre in London. His leather-clad body was found in Warwick Road last Sunday, although police believe he was killed the day before. Detectives think he met his death in the course of a homosexual act. Mr. Everett was making his appeal as he opened a shop in Brompton Road, close to the murder scene this afternoon. A Scotland Yard spokesman said, quote, he kindly agreed to help us by asking anyone who might have seen Mr. Burns on the night he died to come forward, end quote. Oh, and you know, it's such a sad story. What happened to those men was just truly horrific, and you can find the links to both of those episodes in the show notes. But it didn't end there, as after Lupo's arrest in May 1986, the Mirror, on the 28th of May 1986, ran the front page headline, TV Kenny in Gay Murders Quiz, where, they report, TV comic Kenny Everett has been caught up in a gay mass murder probe. His name, along with a host of showbiz stars and society people, has been found in one of 2 murder case, quote, little black books, end quote. Now police are to interview Kenny and the 700 other names in the leather-bound address books. The books were found after a man was arrested and charged with 4 murders and 2 attempted murders. The victims, all men, were attacked in London during the past 2 months. Also named in the books are singer Lindsay DePaul, Bruce Oldfield, Princess Diana's dress designer, and titled women such as Lady Rendlesham and Lady Foxall. Also named is transvestite Vicky de Lambre, who organised a Rock Hudson tribute night after the star died from AIDS. Police will also want to question hundreds of homosexuals at gay clubs and pubs throughout London. The man charged with the murders is 33-year-old boutique manager Michael Lupo. After he was arrested, police raided a flat in Chelsea and seized huge amounts of homosexual literature and photographs. Now, it goes without saying that Kenny had no involvement, and the police confirmed this alongside others named within those address books. It was noted that Lupo may have met one or two individuals at a party, though these were likely people he wanted to meet rather than having actually met. Kenny later stated after the 1987 trial and sentencing of Michele Lupo, quote, "He was just another good-looking guy who once came to one of my parties with some friends," end quote. Then, on the 7th of December 1986, the Sunday People wrote, "Gay television star Kenny Everett is fatalistic about AIDS, recognising that one of his former lovers, Nikolai, is suffering from the deadly disease. Kenny shrugs, quote, 'It's all in the lap of the gods. If I've got it, I've got it,' end quote. Quite so, Ken. What frightens the hell out of me," the journalist, "is that this is exactly the attitude of thousands of homosexuals who suspect they might have been exposed to infection but are still screwing around like randy alley cats." Oh, do you know, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the journalist, but there's two ironies here. The first being that it's language from journalists like this and newspapers, mainly the tabloid newspapers, that weren't necessarily just pushing HIV/AIDS stigma, but they were creating it. They were constantly reinventing it. The gay plague, the killer gay cancer, the killer gay plague. Gay men are infecting our children with HIV/AIDS because of contaminated blood supplies, whether it was... No wonder men were fearful of going and get tested, because it wasn't a case of dealing with a HIV/AIDS diagnosis. It was dealing with the stigma that was created by the press, having your house firebombed, losing your job. And then on the flip side, the other irony is that a lot of men, it's been well documented, were so fearful of the stigma created by the press that they stopped having sex altogether. Or they were practicing safe sex long before having to be told to do so. It's just so ironic. Then, the following year of 1987, as I mentioned earlier, Kenny was repeatedly cited in the national and regional press up and down the country as having appeared in serial killer Michele Lupo's address book, despite there being no real connection between the pair. This sensational claim sparked widespread public interest and a media frenzy, although detectives confirmed that there was no link whatsoever between him and Lupo's criminal activities. Then, fast forward to August 1989, the Sunday People ran the headline, "Gay Kenny flees from puff jeers," with the strapline, "He quits TV series," where they report, "Cruel gay taunts have broken the heart of crackpot comic Kenny Everett. Now the sad tormented star is giving up a new TV comedy series worth about £150,000 to live like a hermit in the country. Zany Kenny has suffered 2 years of misery since confessing he is homosexual. He's been driven to quit the bright lights and his gay past. Quote, "There's no one in my life these days. I don't think I'll ever get married again or live with anybody of either sex." End quote. Kenny, 44, is taking 6 months off to lower his TV profile and rebuild his confidence in a remote corner of Wiltshire. He said, quote, "It's no laughing matter when you are the butt of gay jokes all the time. I sometimes wince when workmen shout out at me, 'Hello, Pufter!'" End quote. Kenny added, quote, "For a long time it was difficult to even leave my home because of the abuse. I'm not a particularly strong character and it really got to me." End quote.
I know there was a very sad period when he first sort of came out. And I think his timing was quite extraordinary. I seem to remember it being about 3 days after Rock Hudson died or something. I remember Kenny coming into the building in tears that these builders had been shouting abuse at him, like sort of from around the corner where he lived. He'd walked past this building site for, 2 or 3 years from his flat. They're all going, "Hello, Kenny, all right, little Ken." And that day they were sort of, "Go, you poofter," and all this. And he was really upset by it.
Kenny, the wit behind Sid Snot and Marcel the hairdresser, has given up men because of the risk of AIDS. He split from Russian lover Nikolai Grushonovich after 6 years. At one time, the pair shared Kenny's West London home with another gay, Spanish waiter Pepe Flores. Quote, "Despite my extrovert image, I'm very sensitive," confessed Kenny, "and the past 2 years have truly been hell. When I find my ideal home, I shall live there alone, apart from my cat. I don't think anybody could put up with me for long. At my time of life, I'm very set in my ways. If my toothpaste isn't where it should be, I get crotchety." End quote. Crotchety, I've not heard that in a long time. Kenny added, quote, "I can well imagine how difficult things must have been for Russell Harty after all the publicity surrounding his private life. He was a sensitive man who couldn't cope with the pressure. Finally, his body gave up. He simply caved in. I'm no different to dear old Russell." End quote. And in that same year, he gave a televised interview from his purpose-built studio at his home to Mavis Nicholson. So, let's take a listen.
Do you think you made a mistake by sort of announcing to the papers that you'd come out?
A mistake? Not really, because it got it over with, I suppose. Because in those days, if you said, as I did, oh, by the way, folks, because they asked me, yes, I'm gay, they went, oh, Kenny Everett is a screaming fag! And that got it over with. Whereas now, if the news of the world want to go to town on you, they have to, I mean, being gay is nothing now. It has to be, he nails choir boys to the roof, sort of thing. You know, they've got to really go to town nowadays. And I'm old news now, so they finished with me. They had a go at me, and now they've finished and gone on to some other poor, unfortunate creature.
Did you find, to your horror, that people were nastier than you expected about it? I mean, like a lot of blacks say that people hurl abuse at them.
Yeah. Well, my masseur, I have this guy, straight, who comes in once every 2 weeks and rearranges all my bones. And he said to me, he said, now you know what it's like being black. Because he's black. And people hurl abuse at him in the street just because he's black.
How did they hurl abuse at you?
Well, there were two little incidents, one of which I've forgotten, and the other was some building worker was dangling off the scaffolding the day after the articles appeared, and they were shouting all sorts of horrible things, and he got his trousers off and waved his willy into the street. I don't know what effect he thought it was going to have on me. Maybe he thought I would faint with delight.
Have you actually been annoyed or hurt or what about it, though? By your newspaper coverage, say?
No, that was just startling. It's startling to see your name on the front page of the Daily Mirror that high. It's very startling.
Do you think they treated you badly, roughly?
Oh,
unfairly?
Yeah, they were deeply inaccurate about most things to do with it. And they, took out the reasonable bits and made the unreasonable, outrageous bits more huge. So in the end, it looks like you're some kind of raging, demented creature. Well, I'm not, just an ordinary...
chap who goes around his business.
Ordinary chap.
Then, on the 28th of April 1991, tabloid newspaper The Mirror ran the headline, Ken Everett Lover Dies, where they report. Comic Kenny Everett's one-time lover, Nikolai Grzonovich, 29, has died of AIDS. The former Red Army soldier died from pneumonia brought on by the killer virus. Last night, 46-year-old Kenny was said to be upset at the news. In this instance, the press was slow to learn that Nikolai had passed away 6 months earlier on the 30th of October 1990 at the London Lighthouse, a dedicated AIDS unit aged only 39. Nikolai, a computer programmer, reportedly died as a result of AIDS-related pneumonia. At the time of his death, he was living at Pembroke Villas, just a street or two away from Freddie Mercury's Garden Lodge and Kenny Everett's home in Lexham Gardens. Nikolai was cremated at the West London Crematorium on the 13th of November 1990. Then, a year later, Kenny Everett and the world was struck again by a loss as a result of AIDS, with the death of Freddie Mercury on the 24th of November 1991. As previously noted, Kenny, Freddie, Pepe and Nikolai had been close friends who affectionately referred to themselves as the Fab Four, with Nikolai and Freddie having shared a regular intimate relationship. The Liverpool Daily Post captured the collective grief on the 26th of November 1991 with the headline, Everett, Day the Laughter Had to Stop, where they report. Kenny Everett no longer shies away from saying he is a homosexual. It became public knowledge when the papers revealed his boyfriend had AIDS. Quote, he died, says Kenny simply. He got the full thing and wizened before my eyes. In about 4 months he aged to 90. He was a real Sagittarian, fun-loving, go-getting, dance on the restaurant tables kind of person, and it certainly knocked the wind out of his sails. Suddenly, he could hardly move and looked like a skeleton. I visited him in hospital every day. What can you do except be there? End quote. Nikolai Grzonovich died last year at the age of 39. Freddie Mercury is another friend lost to AIDS. When his homosexuality was revealed, the reaction from others wasn't as bad as his worries of exposure beforehand. Quote, I am a homosexual and that's all there is to it, folks, he says. Any problem isn't mine. It's other people having to get used to the idea. I don't feel odd about it, but others make you feel ashamed. No, perhaps not ashamed, but different just because you are not one of the majority. At school, when all my chums were pointing at chicks and saying, "Caw, couldn't half do that one a favour," I would just see them as thin boys with different lumps. Like being a Liverpudlian and not supporting Liverpool, but then I'm not football inclined either. I thought I would give myself a couple of years grace and see if I fancied girls and not worry till then. And after that, I gave myself another couple of years. Yes, I'm married. I thought if I lived in close quarters with a chick, I would suddenly say one day, "Oh, I get it." But I wouldn't marry again. It was just a sophisticated way of lying to myself. I know now I'm definitely not straight and never will be in this lifetime. I used to think, bastard press, but now I just think, isn't human nature interesting? End quote. He was upset when a half-drunk gang of construction workers ribbed him and he rose to the bait, earning qualified praise. Quote, their parting line was, "Not bad for a queer." And I thought 3 years ago that would have mortified me, but now I think, yes, I am quite a jolly person, aren't I? One had waved his willy at me. I was highly offended at the time, but now I think it was rather funny. I shouted back, "You're safe." He had never told his parents. Quote, they were very simple Liverpool folk. He was a tug driver and she was a housewife. I felt it might upset them by pointing out that their son was rather odd. So they found out from the front page of a Sunday tabloid. End quote. He pronounces rather odd in a distinctive Kenny Everett way, with an emphasis that infers his own embarrassment at their discovery. Quote, I guess we are warmer and more pleasant people because we are partly female and quite philosophical with some of that feminine intuition. You have to cope with the slings and arrows, like being Jewish or black. I have a black friend who says you are a repository for a shared hatred. It's not that they are insulting the fact that you are a faggot or Jewish or black or whatever. They just need to scream at someone and you are handy. End quote. Kenny was speaking from a dressing room, which he described as a railway carriage with phone and fridge. He is appearing in The Hunting of the Snark, a Lewis Carroll play in the West End of London.
Zany disc jockey and personality Kenny Everett being put through his paces for the new musical The Hunting of the Snark. Kenny's learnt to tap dance for his starring role, but his initial response when the producer asked him to make his West End debut.
I said no, because the sight of 2,000 pairs of eyes across the footlights would terrify me out of my mind. And he said, "Oh, well, I've thought of a way out of that. Before you come on, I'll go on stage and say, 'Kenny's terribly shy. Would you all please leave?' And they could all have a drink while I do my number."
Are you very shy then?
Oh, terribly shy. I'm so shy.
The £2 million musical adventure is an adaptation of Lewis Carroll's epic nonsense poem, but not even director Mike Batt, creator of the Womble songs, knows what a snark is.
It's a kind of crazy musical adventure, and it really is a mystery as to what the snark is, and you're invited to, find out for yourself, really.
The show opens at the Prince Edward Theatre on October the 24th. Catherine Bayfield for Thames News.
Kenny was born Maurice Cole at Seaforth on Christmas Day 1944. The name change came when he got his first pirate radio DJ job. Quote, they could not pay us under our real names because we were an offshore company. My favourite actor was Edward Everett Horton, and I looked in the mirror and thought, I look like a Kenny Everett. I never thought I was a Maurice. I don't look like one, do I? Or a Cole? End quote. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Cole, who named him Maurice, probably travelled further than anyone else for the first night of Hunting of the Snark, from Perth, Australia. They emigrated to polish off life, quote, in a beautiful, clean city, end quote. Then, Kenny looking visibly thinner, the tabloid press began to ask questions, where on the front page of The People newspaper, dated 4th of April 1993, they ran the headline, Kenny Everett Shock, accompanied by the strapline, the amazing picture that shows how ill he really is. Where? They report. Comic Kenny Everett looks pale and gaunt in this amazing picture which shows why friends are so concerned about his health. Kenny, 48, who has been off sick several times from his show on London's Capital Radio, now regularly visits a private hospital near his London home for throat treatment. The most recent appointment was on Wednesday. A series of personal problems have hit Kenny in recent years. First, his marriage broke up, then 2 years ago his gay lover, Nikolai Grishnovich, died of AIDS. Full story and more pictures, pages 2 and 3. Oh God, aren't they just ghastly? And the 2-page spread inside has the headline, "Looking pale and gaunt, Kenny sets off to hospital in his cloth cap and scarf," where, the article states, the comic, who became a national favourite on TV and radio, looks pale and drawn as he walks from his London home to keep a nearby hospital appointment. Few fans would recognise the gaunt figure as Kenny Everett. He has swapped his trademark beard for a moustache, and beneath the giant umbrella he wears a cloth cap, muffler and glasses. DJ Kenny, 48, who was devastated when his gay lover, Nikolai Grishnovich, died from AIDS 2.5 years ago, was keeping an appointment on Wednesday at the exclusive Cromwell Hospital. Kenny, often absent from his Golden Oldies show on London's Capital Radio, has visited the private Kensington hospital several times in the past 2 years. And the man who has always lived on the edge is clearly suffering again. This time he has a serious throat condition, which is thought he picked up while singing in the West End musical The Hunting of the Snark. He has been seeing the Cromwell's ear, nose and throat specialist Dr. Colin Wallace for treatment. A colleague at the hospital, AIDS specialist Dr. Brian Gazzard, visited Queen star Freddie Mercury shortly before his death in November 1991 and knows Kenny socially. Quote, "Our social contact is through the tremendous charity work he does for the Cromwell," he said. Kenny's DJ pal and fellow Capital Gold presenter, David Hamilton, said yesterday, quote, "Kenny does seem to be off a lot more than the rest of us, but I don't think there's anything you can read into that other than he seems to get a lot of colds and flu. He's just a lot more fragile than the rest of us." End quote. Gay Kenny, who has been on leave from Capital Radio all week, is used to battling against the odds. First, his 16-year marriage to spiritualist Lee failed. Then, in 1990, Russian-born Nikolai, the long-term lover he called, quote, "my husband," end quote, died aged 39 after a 2-year battle against the HIV virus. Just 1 year later, the illness claimed Freddie Mercury, a close pal of Kenny for more than 20 years. AIDS also killed courier Tony Bastin, once pictured with Kenny, Freddie and Nikolai on a happy night out in a West End restaurant. Last night, a Capital Radio spokesman said that Kenny had been forced to take time off work because of teeth trouble. He said, quote, "He's had bad fillings, I think. He was off for a couple of days and couldn't talk properly. I think this was a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how many days he's been off ill, but according to his contract, he's got 10 weeks holiday a year." End quote. Kenny flew off for a weekend break to Italy on Friday and last night was unavailable for comment. But the very next day, on the 5th of April 1993, the Daily Mirror ran the front page headline, "Yes, I've got the AIDS virus, admits comic Kenny," where they report. Oh, do I have to read? Tragic Kenny Everett admitted. This is the thing with the newspapers. You do notice in the archive that, for well over a decade, every time they were referring to Kenny Everett, and they always seem to start off with zany Kenny Everett or comic Kenny Everett, but zany was kind of the one. Then we heard that he came out as being gay, and then they referred to him every now and again as gay Kenny Everett. Now he's seemingly confirming or coming out with his HIV/AIDS status, and now it's all of a sudden it's tragic Kenny Everett. It's just like, oh God, give it a rest. Anyhow, we've got to stick with it. Tragic Kenny Everett admitted yesterday that he has the AIDS virus, but the zany comic still kept joking as he talked for the first time about his sad secret. Kenny, whose gay lover died 2 years ago, said at his West London home, quote, "Yes, I'm HIV positive. Isn't everybody? I've known for about 4 years, but it seems like ages. I think I picked up the virus in New York about 10 years ago." End quote. The Capital Radio DJ said he did not have the full-blown disease, but admitted he had a sore throat, which is one of the first symptoms. The 48-year-old entertainer added, quote, "I'm not angry, but resigned. I'm up 1 minute and down the next." He also confessed, quote, "I've been thinking a lot about death and I think everything will be all right now. I see death in my own philosophical way. I can't imagine I was nowhere before this and I'd like to come back in Italy or Spain or somewhere. As long as I don't come back bald or in Bosnia, I don't mind, end quote. Kenny looked bronzed and well after returning from a weekend trip to Italy. Oh, so the press had clearly camped out on his doorstep waiting for him to come back. Would you really need this coming back from a holiday? He said he was still living life to the full and urged all AIDS sufferers to keep on having fun, quote, before it all falls apart, end quote. Kenny works out at a local health club 3 times a week and likes raving on Saturday night at one of London's top gay night spots, Heaven. He said, quote, I'm really enjoying life at the moment, so I'm hoping I've got ages yet, end quote. Kenny says he has stopped sleeping around since he found he has the virus. He said, quote, up until I found out I was HIV positive, I was pretty raving. I've stopped all that now and I'm celibate. I do it by post now.
You are very neat and tidy yourself about the house, aren't you?
I'm manically tidy, yes. Being a bachelor, I've got nothing to do but flick dust from room to room. I see a piece of dust coming through the window, I thought, gotcha! I follow it round until it settles up. Whack! Then it drifts into the kitchen. I'm waiting for it.
Do you enjoy all that?
Yeah,
Do you enjoy the cleaning up?
I must be the
hoovering?
only person who keeps running into the closet to fetch a J-cloth. I love J-cloths, best invention in the world because you can clean them afterwards.
His first reaction to the news that he was HIV positive was to groan, quote, oh fuck, end quote. So you can see really how intrusive, I mean it's a tabloid newspaper you expect it, but how intrusive they are. So he's come back for his holidays, he got a suitcase full of dirty grundies that he wants to get into the washing machine, and like most of us when we come back from holiday we want to get in, get the washer on, have a cup of tea, and he's been constantly bombarded with questions. Have you got HIV/AIDS? Have you given up sex? Are you still having sex? What did you say when you found out? You know, it's just like, oh God, give the guy a break. But as I said at the outset of this episode, he's quite candid, you know, he's quite open and he's using humour to respond. He's not shying away from their questions, giving them more of a story, you know, making it more of a sensation. He's very much like, this is why Kenny really is a Pride Month icon, in the sense that he's just like very blasé about it. They're asking him questions and he's giving them an answer. To a degree, it's shutting them up. It's answering all the questions, gets it out there. That's it. You haven't got a story, you know. There's no sensationalism to it. I'm giving you the answers and it's actually quite boring. He says he has no idea how long he has to live, but says his doctor is quite impressed with his progress. See, there's another question. How long do you think you've got, Kenny? Oh, man. Kenny said, quote, I went to my doctor on Wednesday and asked him how long I had. I wanted to know whether I should draw my pension fund money out. I was buying a hat that day and I asked him, is it worth buying a hat or should I not bother? He said, buy a hat. You look fine. You'll probably last ages. Kenny denied that he infected his dead... Oh, no. Kenny denied that he infected his dead lover, Nikolai with the killer virus. He added, I don't know. You can't see the HIV virus. It's more likely the bastard gave it to me. I'll get him back about it when I get to heaven. End quote. See? So there's another question they would have been firing. Kenny, did Nikolai give you the virus? Or Kenny, did you give Nikolai the virus? Oh, can you imagine? Just coming back from your holiday and this is, oh my gosh. People say that he didn't do much. He did. He really kind of closed the media down. He stopped the sensationalism, you know. He's just giving them these direct answers and he's adding a bit of humour to it as well, making light of the situation so it's not doom and gloom. Because if it had been closed up, clammed up and, you know, gone into his house with a blanket over his head and refused to comment, this would have dragged on and on and on. You know, what else can you ask me? There's nothing. You've really asked all these really intrusive questions and there it is. Deal with it. This is why Kenny's so iconic. Anyhow, back to the article. Last night he was planning to phone his family in Australia to break the news. Speaking about AIDS in general, he said, quote, I think people panic a little over this and I'm hoping there is a lot less talk about AIDS in the papers. Now there is news that 10% of HIV sufferers don't go on to get full-blown AIDS. So what do we believe? AIDS is just something you die of, like cancer. It's flavour of the month at the moment. 200 years ago, it was the bubonic plague. We all have death hanging over us. It's just that I'll probably get there before most people do. I'll phone you. End quote. And it's also really interesting that bit of misinformation that was believed at the time in the 80s and here in 1993 that not everybody who had HIV would develop AIDS, which essentially we know not to be true today. Everybody who's got HIV will go on to develop AIDS because the HIV virus, eradicates attacks and eradicates the immune system to the point where it's so depleted that you end up dying of an AIDS-related complication, such as pneumonia or PCP, etc. DJ Diddy, David Hamilton, a friend of Kenny's for 20 years, said, quote, "I am absolutely devastated. I last saw him 3 weeks ago and he was his normal bubbling self, looking fine and full of fun," end quote. Now the HIV time bomb is ticking for Kenny. Death terrifies him, but the zany comic says bravely, quote, "I'm hoping for great things. I think God wants us to have a good time up there," end quote. And after that, you'd think with all Kenny's candour and humour that the press, the tabloid press, but especially the Daily Mirror here, would leave Kenny alone. But the following day,
Kenny Everett was ambushed by cameras and fans as he turned up for work this afternoon. He admitted he would have preferred keeping quiet about being HIV positive, but his message was that he was feeling as zany as ever.
What's your response to all the fans who've turned out today?
I got 3 hugs in the street this morning. Yeah. I must do this more often.
Kenny Everett has known about his condition for 4 years. He could have picked up the virus as much as 10 years ago.
And the Daily Mirror ran the headline, "Keep watching the repeats." That's his message to TV fans, with the strapline, "AIDS shock, Kenny gets a kiss and a hug," where they report. The show went on for Kenny Everett yesterday as he faced the public for the first time since revealing he has the AIDS virus, and an audience of passers-by loved the comedy star's brave routine when he stepped out in London. Kenny, 48, was kissed by an admiring girl. He was hugged by an out-of-work actor, Ricky Lewis, 28. And, asked if he had a message for viewers who have been fans since his 1970s TV series, he joked, quote, "Yes, keep watching the repeats," end quote. Kenny took a 12-minute walk from his £200,000 flat to the Earl's Court gym where he works out regularly. Striding along in trainers and grabbing a reporter's umbrella, he talked all the way. Kenny told how he broke the news to his mother, a strict Catholic living in Australia. He said he had phoned her on Sunday night and his first words had been, quote, "Hi Mum, are you still a Catholic?" Kenny added, "She already knew I was HIV positive because reporters had got to her." Ugh. Her reaction? Quote, "She was upset," Kenny said. "Wouldn't you be upset if your cat got run over?" End quote. But he said that his mother had long ago stopped trying to impose Catholic views on him. Quote, "We do not agree on religion," he admitted. Kenny was wearing a cap that he bought after laughingly asking his doctor whether he'd lived long enough to use the new Titfer. And he was getting set to continue his madcap antics during his Capital Radio programme. On the air, a newsreader told him he looked well. Kenny replied, quote,
"Disgraceful, may I say how well you're looking after your holiday?"
Oh, no, I'm gaunt. I read it in the paper. I'm gaunt.
End quote. He teased fans waiting to see him outside the radio station. Quote,
My God, here I am dying and they're wanting Tony Blackburn.
End quote. Kenny told reporters, quote, "It's all been a hell of a palaver. If I come back after my death, I want God to make sure that I return as a bricklayer. They don't make the front pages every time they fart." End quote. Ex-raver Kenny said that he would like to spend his remaining days in peace. Quote, "I want to lead a quiet life," he said. "I will insist upon it. That would be nice, wouldn't it?" End quote. Kenny, who created a string of screen characters including Sid Snot, pulled the plug on his TV series in the late 1970s after 110 shows. He explained, quote, "I like doing radio now because you don't have to wear as much makeup as on TV." End quote. It was as Kenny left the gym that he bumped into Ricky, who used to meet him at parties given by AIDS victim pop star Freddie Mercury. Ricky recalled, quote, "That was all about 8 years ago. At the parties, Kenny never took any risk I was aware of. He certainly was not promiscuous. If he's HIV positive, it's his business and no one else's. He's a great guy. It's terribly sad." Hear, hear, Ricky. Then, on the 8th of April 1993, Kenny was mentioned in an article alongside Holly Johnson, who had also publicly shared his HIV/AIDS diagnosis, a moment we explored in the first episode of this Pride Month Icons miniseries. Both men demonstrated remarkable courage in revealing their status at a time when stigma and fear were pervasive. In Kenny's case, it seems the press, having learned of his diagnosis by the 4th of April 1993, pressured him into disclosure by the story they ran. Despite this, both Kenny and Holly are frequently acknowledged as fearless and unapologetic figures, helping to normalise living with HIV by confronting societal prejudices head-on. Their openness challenged moral judgments and contributed significantly to reducing the silence and shame surrounding the condition. On the 11th of April 1993, the Independent on Sunday newspaper addressed this directly with the headline, "Kenny and Holly find positive ways to face up to new kind of fame," where journalist William Leaf highlighted their strength in navigating public scrutiny while living openly with HIV/AIDS. Last Sunday, the People and the News of the World did not reveal the fact that disc jockey Kenny Everett had the AIDS virus. Not quite. The People said, quote, "Comic Kenny Everett looks pale and gaunt in this amazing picture, which shows why friends are so concerned about his health." Going on to say, 2 years ago his gay lover, Nikolai died of AIDS, end quote. There was no proof at this stage. Everett had not stated that he had HIV, and his medical records are confidential. But the hints were very broad. The People's word, quote, "gaunt," end quote, used on Freddie Mercury has taken on the status of a code word. And under the headline, quote, "Zany comic in AIDS anguish," the News of the World said, quote, "Friends in the gay community say rumours are rife that the zany comic, loved by millions, is HIV positive," end quote. Now that the rumours had been printed, their substance could be confirmed or denied. Everett, who was on holiday in Italy, was due back at his Kensington home that Sunday afternoon. When he got out of his taxi, the journalists were waiting for him. Quote, "There's 4 of us outside the house," end quote, said Chris Farrow of The Sun. Quote, "We said, 'Well, Kenny, you've obviously seen today's papers. We have to ask the question, are you HIV positive?' To which he replied, 'Yes.'" Sharon Ring of the News of the World said, quote, "He handled it brilliantly. I don't think you can point to a news story which was handled so brilliantly, so wittily, so cleverly," end quote. Still, Everett's celebrity will now take on a new tone. He will be an HIV celebrity, someone famous for being famous and testing positive for HIV. There is, as yet, no easy way to avoid this status, no matter how the news emerges. Last week, another famous figure in the British pop world chose voluntarily and dignified disclosure in an interview published in The Times. Holly Johnson, the lead singer of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, said that when he first learned that he was HIV positive, he could, quote, "hardly hear what was said to me for fear of the media and what they would do when they got hold of the story. I imagined the headlines. I was afraid that the first thing they'd say would be that this person who'd promoted a promiscuous homosexual lifestyle was basically getting his just desserts," end quote. Indeed, this happened, exactly as Johnson predicted. Before The Times published the story on Saturday, it leaked out to its stablemate, The Sun, which rushed into print on Thursday with large headlines, quote, "I was part of a huge explosion of gay promiscuity," says Holly, end quote. On Friday, The Times apologised, quote, "It is a matter of regret that stories based on the interview appeared in newspapers other than The Times yesterday." But The Sun was unrepentant, quote, "The single most important message we should be teaching our kids," wrote its columnist Gary Bushell, "is that sodomy kills. So a popular figure who is HIV positive has no real choice. He can be doorstepped and questioned by reporters, or he can, quote, come out, end quote, at a time and in a manner of his own choosing, but the result will be the same, a new kind of fame and some degree of ignominy. Last week, in fact, it was the involuntary Everett who fared better than the voluntary Johnson. Quote, "The way comic Kenny announced his personal tragedy showed maturity and a sense of proportion," wrote Bushell. "In this case, maturity equals humour. Quote, my sense of humour will be the last thing to go," end quote, Everett said. "I've been wondering what to put on my tombstone, and I think it will be, quote, no punchline, ring Barry Cryer," end quote. He added, quote, "It's not affecting my work. How healthy do you have to be to play Dadu Ron Ron?" Then on the 15th of July 1993, the Daily Mirror ran the headline, "I'll Let AIDS Kill Me Off Quickly" by Kenny Everett. Stricken DJ Kenny Everett has told how he wants to die quickly if he develops full-blown AIDS. Gay Kenny, who has been HIV positive for 4 years, said he will refuse drugs that could postpone the end. And he managed a laugh as he added, quote, "I have decided not to take anything when it starts getting hideous because that way I'll go faster. I'd hate to cling on because I'll be more beautiful and fabulous in my next life. I want to be on the dance floor in the middle of a great tune. I'd just slump to the sound of wild applause as I die." End quote. Kenny, 48, a star of London's Capital Gold Station, said he hoped an AIDS cure would not be found, quote, "just after I've spent the last of my pension," end quote. He added, "I've got another 1.5 years yet because I can't get my hands on it until I'm 50, end quote. Kenny refused to be upset when told he was HIV positive and has been celibate since. He told Hello magazine, quote, "I thought that getting the full-blown disease was probably so far off that I'd worry about it later because we're all going to die of one thing or another," end quote. The DJ's heart has been touched by hundreds of messages of support, quote, "Their warmth has surprised me," he said.
I think the day he announced that he was HIV positive, all we had were letters of support. Wonderful, wonderful letters saying how sorry they were to hear that he was HIV positive. However, carry on working, we still want to see you, we still want to listen to you. And they were loyal and true.
A year later, on the 5th of June 1994, the Daily Mirror ran the front page headline, "Exclusive, I've got AIDS, British superstar's tragic news." Presenting the article as a sit-down interview with Kenny, cleverly wove snippets of his earlier comments to create the illusion of an intimate conversation, when in reality the reporters were merely talking to him briefly on the doorstep of his home as he was leaving. This approach reveals much about the tabloids' blatant disregard for privacy and their invasive tactics. Although persistent doorstep questioning gave them access to honest insights from Kenny, who was never one to dodge difficult questions, though it's doubtful that he welcomed the press ambushing him at every outing.
It's startling to see your name on the front page of the Daily Mirror that high. It's very startling.
Do you think they treated you badly, roughly?
They were deeply inaccurate about most things to do with it. And they, took out the reasonable bits and made the unreasonable, outrageous bits more huge. So in the end, it looks like you're some kind of raging, demented creature.
The accompanying 2-page spread, headlined, "I've got full-blown AIDS, but brave Kenny jokes in the face of death," underscores both the tragic nature of his diagnosis and his remarkable courage in confronting it with humour. Tragic disc jockey Kenny Everett revealed last night that he is suffering from full-blown AIDS, and he has only just managed to fight off a serious bout of pneumonia, a common killer of AIDS sufferers. Quote, "Yes, it's true, I've got full-blown AIDS," said gay Kenny, who is 49.
I guess because of his humour, his indomitable spirit, we thought he would be one of those who remained HIV positive forever, and so we were, of course, shattered when he rang and said, "It's developed, I have full-blown AIDS." We were very sad.
The first big moment was 3 weeks ago when I got pneumonia and ended up in Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London. Fortunately, the staff managed to catch it in time and put me on a 2-week course of pills, which made me feel hideous. End quote. Kenny, who is still working as a DJ on London's Capital Gold radio station, has known he is HIV positive for 5 years. His gay lover Nikolai died 3 years ago. But, looking tanned and fit, Kenny put on a brave face and made light of his illness as he chatted at his £200,000 flat in London's exclusive Kensington. Quote, "Time is elastic, but as you can see, I'm still here," he said. "I'm still on the radio, but we are all getting older." End quote. The zany star, whose outrageous TV characters like Sid Snot and Cupid Stunt were all loved by millions, said all he wanted now was a quiet life. Quote, "To be frank, I'm trying to become anonymous now," he said, pulling down his blue baseball cap. I don't do silly jokes on TV anymore. I'm trying to become a normal human being. I suppose I have nothing left to say, although it's no hassle talking about AIDS. I'm not doing any big interviews. There's nothing new. I have said it all." But he still kept his wacky sense of humour. When asked what pills he had been given to fight off pneumonia, he said, with a smile, quote, "Little white ones, actually," end quote. And when he was asked if he minded having his picture taken, he snapped back, quote, "Only if it's in colour," end quote. The latest news about Kenny's deteriorating health will shock the whole entertainment world. Quote, "I had absolutely no idea he was so ill," said one showbiz pal. But Kenny has never been one to make a fuss. He is such an incredibly nice person. He doesn't like being thought of in a pessimistic way. He hates all that doom and gloom. He likes people to think of him as someone who lives life to the full, has lots of fun and makes everyone happy. There's nothing he likes better than to make everyone laugh. This is terribly sad news. He will hate this, but he will be immensely brave, I know, just like he has been up until now. His heart was also touched by thousands of letters of support he's received. Quote, "I thought people would cross the road when they saw me or throw stones," he said, "but I've been surprised at their warmth. I've had so many nice letters, no negative ones. It has renewed my faith in human nature." End quote. On the 4th of September 1994, the Sunday People demonstrated typical tabloid enthusiasm, and that's more, should be reworded to hounding, by capturing exclusive photos of Kenny in Hyde Park. Surrounded by friends, Kenny was snapped sporting a noticeably new goatee, a subtle but striking change in his usual look. The paper seized the moment with the headline, "Kenny gets his goatee," highlighting the minor yet newsworthy style update, reflecting the tabloid's penchant for turning everyday moments into major stories, where, they report, it's all in the best possible taste. The beard, that is. Age-stricken DJ Kenny Everett looks remarkably relaxed and fit, with a new goatee beard, nothing like the one he sported for his famous TV character Cupid Stunt, in these first pictures of him since recovering from pneumonia. Kenny, 49, had feared the pneumonia would kill him, but here he was obviously taking everything in his stride as he enjoyed a picnic in London Hyde Park with two friends.
Everett has died today from an AIDS-related illness. He was 50. Everett became one of the best-known faces on British television, with his comedy show featuring characters such as Sid Snot and the drag star Cupid Stunt. Our show business correspondent Ken Andrew looks back on Everett's career and his battle against AIDS.
Bye.
This was Kenny Everett almost 2 years ago to the day when it was first revealed that he was HIV positive. He signalled then that he intended to cope with his illness with the same humour that made him a household name.
My God, here I am dying and they're wanting Tony Blackburn.
Kenny Everett was married early in his career, but it ended during his days as a pirate radio DJ. Later, he openly admitted being gay. His Russian lover had died from an AIDS-related illness. But the publicity only served to hide what had been a hugely successful career, first in radio, then on television, where he created characters like Gizzard Puke, Cupid Stunt and Sid Snot.
I sometimes get worried about my girlfriend Deirdre, you know, on the streets late at night, you know, with all them muggins. On the other hand, if she wants to go out mugging, that's her business.
Fellow DJs have paid tribute to his innovative style. Noel Edmonds called him quite simply a genius who is an eternal source of inspiration to broadcasters.
He was a bit of an Eric Cantona, I think, in some ways. People thought, oh my God, what's he going to do next? And they honestly didn't know. You know, he was fired and reinstated, and but totally, you know, irreverent. You know, every schoolboy's dream to cheek the boss and get away with it. Wonderful.
He was a very funny, very witty guy. At the same time, off air, he was a very shy guy. He was a real gentleman. He was very sweet and very generous to his friends.
Kenny carried on broadcasting as long as possible. On air, death, it seems, held little fear for him.
Much missed, Kenny Everett.
London's Evening Standard on the 4th of April 1995 ran the front page headline under a photo of Kenny Everett dies after fight with AIDS, where they report, Kenny Everett, the DJ whose zany sense of humour hid a troubled personal life, died today from an AIDS-related illness. Everett, 50, a TV star who turned his back on fame to return to radio, had his sister Kate and his manager Joe Gurnett by his side when he died peacefully in his sleep. The former Radio 1 DJ, who became a television star with his Kenny Everett video show, admitted he had the virus in 1993, but vowed to fight it. He once reflected on his life, quote, "I see it in 3 stages. A very depressing drab start in Liverpool, a second bit which was the mad whirl of being famous, and the third which is winding down, taking care and being ill." End quote. Radio 1 controller Matthew Bannister said, quote, "Kenny was a great innovator and above all, a genuinely funny man." Then the following day, I don't know if we can call this a zany piece or just an article verging on the ridiculous, the Daily Mirror ran the front page headline, "Kenny's £8,000 deathbed. Comic genius splashed out at Harrods to die in the best possible taste," where they report, "Tragic Kenny Everett, who died of AIDS yesterday, bought an £8,000 Harrods bed so he could go out in style. The 50-year-old comic genius refused to go into hospital to face his final hours. Instead, he insisted on staying at his peach-coloured apartment in London's Kensington, surrounded by his cuddly toys and memories of 30 years in showbiz. Like his TV catchphrase, it was all in the best possible taste." DJ Tony Blackburn said last night, quote, "Kenny told me that if AIDS had to take him, he wanted it to happen in the most sumptuous bed money could buy. He said, 'I want to die in luxury.' It set him back £8,000, but he didn't care." End quote. Kenny died in his sleep with sister Kate Horgan and manager Joe Gurnett at his bedside. He had received the last rites from local priest Father William Houghton. And within the same article, within the Daily Mirror, Cleo Rockus gives her reaction to the passing of her dear friend and co-star. Kenny's wacky sidekick, Cleo Rockus, wept when she heard of his death. She said, quote, "Oh my God, I can't bear it." End quote. Curvy Cleo, 32, told of their last meeting when Kenny whispered, quote, "I'm falling apart." End quote. She added, quote, "It was terrible to see him, a man of such wit and vitality, wasting away like this. He always put on a brave face and was always laughing and joking about his condition, but deep down he knew how serious it was, and that was plain to see." End quote. Cleo starred with Kenny in his smash hit TV shows in the 80s, which pulled in 15 million viewers. The Brazilian-born beauty said, quote, "The last time I saw him, he was so pitifully thin. I looked at him and thought, I just want to squeeze you, put some life into you and make you well again. I think that night I knew deep down it was the last time I was going to see him. But Kenny's eyes were just the same, an amazing sparkling blue with a naughty twinkle. We had a fantastic night together, and when I left, Kenny pulled the window down, waved frantically and shouted, 'We must have lunch soon.'" Kenny Everett's funeral took place on the 10th of April 1995, as reported by the London's Evening Standard on the same day. Outrageous and irreverent in life, Kenny Everett was today honoured at a funeral service imbued by an almost uncharacteristic sense of tradition and respect. As the mourners gathered at one of London's smartest Catholic churches, it was hard to remember this was the DJ who cornered the market in Zany with such creations as Sid Snot, the belligerent Hell's Angel, and Marcel Wave, the impossibly camp hairdresser. But then with Everett, who died last Tuesday of an age-related illness at the age of 50, it was always a fine line between camp and serious, between sentiment and deep belief. In an interview on Desert Island Discs, recorded after he had been diagnosed as having AIDS, he talked of being, quote,
"If I ever do die, I think as I'm hoiked aloft in a ray of God's lovely sunbeam."
Today, at least, there were sunbeams, and the daffodils and tulips atop his coffin as it was borne into the Church of the Immaculate Conception in Mayfair created such a sunny picture that, for a moment, it was possible to forget that this was the Everett who had such a tortured personal life, from his suicide attempt to the deep anxieties he suffered after publicly declaring himself homosexual. Today's service was meant to be only for family and close friends, but there were enough people from the world of show business to remind one that Everett was much admired and much imitated. As well as his sister, Kate Horgan, who had travelled from Australia to nurse him through his illness, the service was also attended by his ex-wife, Lee Olkin, fellow Capital DJ Chris Tarrant, Noel Edmonds, Paul Gambaccini, Alan Freeman, and Christopher Biggins. Everett was brought up a Catholic and was once sent to a seminary at the age of 14, but he was to say later, quote, "I'm no longer Catholic, I'm freelance," end quote. The service was conducted by Father William Houghton of Our Lady of Victories in Kensington, who was with Everett up to an hour before he died. Quote, "God has an abundant sense of humour and, as such, Kenny would be very welcome in heaven," Father Houghton said. Everett was later cremated at a private ceremony at Mortlake.
There was so much love on his funeral, I don't think I will ever experience anything like it again. To see all those people, all those presenters, all those faces who said we loved him, he was brilliant, and it must have meant such a lot to him. It really must. Because I firmly believed in the church he was still going to pop out of the coffin. I just thought it's going to be another sketch. It's just going to open any minute and he's going to say,
"Hello! It was all a joke." You know, that was the mood, that this isn't real and, you know, that he'll be back.
The man was an infinite comic. He had this tremendous sense of humour, and I'm quite sure that had he been here today, and it had been my funeral service, he probably would have said something quite outrageous to somebody in the church. In fact, one almost expected that somehow he would appear.
He was a total original, and it's a very, very sad day. We'll miss him greatly, but I'm sure when he's up there, he's making them all laugh now. He's probably there with the big hands, giving it all that now.
If you had to sort of sum him up, you would say, well, he had a fantastic view of the world and he was the fantasy within it.
I'd like to dunk you in my coffee, spread you on my bread. Gee, I wish that you were in the highball going to my head. Dear, when you sit across the table, I'm done like the giant in the fable. Fee-fi, for fun, overcome with a cannibalistic feeling. I'd like to smother you with mushrooms and everything. I claim you'd be a dainty dish to set before a king. Sweetheart, if I could obtain you as part of my daily menu, I'd like to dunk you in my coffee, spread you on my bread.
Life is funny. It's odd. It's a rather amusing joke, really. I mean, you just got to get on with it and make it as much fun for yourself and other people as possible. I mean, sure, no regret-arine. I mean, if I could obtain you as part of my daily menu, I'd like to dunk you in my coffee, spread you on my bread.
You can check out and read all the newspaper articles mentioned in this episode, along with extra snippets of information, on the Extra T blog. You can find the link in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Until the next episode, you can find me on Instagram at The Lost Boys of Soho.